Hello world. So today we're going to be comparing one of the best Sony E-mount lenses, the Sigma 16 f1.4, to the one of the worst E-mount lenses, the Sony kit lens, the 16-50 f3.5-5.6. So why would I do such a nonsense comparison? Since I'm a non-professional who uses kit lens, I actually have two of them. I always wondered, are prime lenses like these worth the money? Especially when some of them are half the price of the camera, and in some cases more than the prices of the camera. Let's go find out. So since I rarely take photos with my A6400, the main aspects that I'll be comparing these two lenses are video aspects. So the first one being the outdoor and focal length, and the second is indoor low light situations, third being the autofocus, and fourth being the stabilization. So first, the outdoor slash focal length. To my amateur eyes, the two look very similar. I wouldn't say one's significantly better than the other in outdoor image quality, and you could say the Sigma looks sharper, but to my amateur eyes, I couldn't tell the difference between the Sigma and the Sony in terms of the outdoor footage. Especially on like a smartphone or a 1080p screen, I don't think you can tell the difference. But the aspect that you could definitely tell the difference in is the focal length. So the Sigma 16mm being a prime lens, it's limited to one focal length, the 16mm. Whereas the Sony, it's 16-50, so it's definitely more versatile. And this actually comes quite useful when you're traveling because you can't always walk up to the subject, especially in like a zoo or anywhere where you're shooting wildlife. I mean, you shouldn't shoot wildlife with this, but still, it's something useful compared to something that's stuck at one image, one field of view. I mean, you could use a clear image zoom to kind of get a little bit closer, 1.5 times zoom in 4K, 2 times in 1080p, but still it's not as versatile as having something like the kit lens where it can go to 50mm and then back to 16 easily. So in lower light situations and in indoor situations, the Sigma is definitely sharper with its bright lens compared to the Sony with its f3.5. But that's not to say the kit lens is not usable. The kit lens is definitely usable if you don't mind it being a little bit higher ISO, and it's definitely not something that you can't use or anything like that. Definitely Sigma is better, there's no doubt about that, but the kit lens is definitely usable. But in extreme low light situations like pitch dark, then definitely the Sigma will do the trick compared to the Sony. The ISO is just quite different, almost like 4 times different in some cases, and the Sigma is able to keep the ISO much lower, producing a less grainy image compared to the kit lens, which is gonna have very high ISO and have very grainy image quality. This is, I think, the selling point for the Sigma, and I bought this lens mainly to shoot in low light situations and indoor situations, and I'm still impressed by how good this is in low light. And just look at the footage, it makes me happy. So third, the autofocus. Since the A6400 that I have has great autofocus ability, I felt even the third-party lens, the Sigma, had good autofocus system, even comparable to the native Sony lens, and I couldn't really tell the difference between the two throughout my use of both lenses. And definitely, if you're buying anything that's a A6000 and up, then you shouldn't have any problems with both lenses autofocus. But if you're buying something like the older A5000 models, then the Sigma is much slower. I mean, I don't use my A5000 much anymore, but still, it's definitely a lot slower. You would have to do some manual focusing. So fourth aspect is the stabilization. And like most APS-C cameras for Sony, the A6400 doesn't have any in-body stabilization, meaning you do have to rely on the lens stabilization. The Sigma doesn't have image stabilization, whereas the Sony kit lens does. And it does show a difference when you're panning, where the Sony is relatively stable compared to the Sigma, where you see a lot of hand shakes and jitters. But when you're walking with the camera, the stabilization in the kit lens isn't that great, so they're both quite unstable. But on a gimbal, both of them are pretty equal. I would say the kit lens is probably a little bit more stable because it has the in-lens stabilization, but I wouldn't say it's that big of a difference. You can definitely use the Sigma footage as long as you put it on a gimbal. So it really does depend on what your typical shooting situation is. If you're mostly shooting on a tripod or on a gimbal, then the lack of stabilization in the Sigma isn't that big of an issue. But if you're vlogging a lot and if you want to carry your camera around a lot, then you might have to stick with this. So the verdict. Considering you can get the kit lens for only $100 extra when you buy the camera, it's worth every penny. It can zoom, it's stabilized, and it's very small, so it's a very good travel lens. Obviously it's not the best at low light with its f3.5 aperture, but doesn't mean it's not usable. So I definitely recommend it. If you can, when you buy the camera, definitely buy it with the kit lens bundle. Unless you know for sure that you have the money to upgrade already, the $100 that you spend extra will carry you far until you can afford more expensive lenses. And the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Since it was introduced in 2017, it definitely has been one of the best lenses for the Sony E-mount, along with its brothers, the Sigma 30mm and the 56mm f1.4. Its f1.4 aperture allows you to get some very nice bokeh and very nice low light shots. So if it's something that you like to do, then definitely the Sigma 16mm is a good choice. But being a large lens and also being almost half the price of the camera at $450, is it really worth it? I still think so. The reason you get these interchangeable cameras when small cameras have such good image quality nowadays is that you are able to adapt to different situations and adapt different lenses depending on the situation. And the f1.4 in this lens definitely has a place in low light situations, as you can see again here. So to summarize, if you're looking to add a prime lens after you buy your kit lens, definitely one of the Sigma lenses are the way to go. The Sigma 16 if you like the wide angle lens, and the 30 if you like the more standard look, and the 56 if you do a lot of portrait shots. But if you can't afford any of these lenses, because they're not expensive, but they are a few $100s, then the kit lens will definitely do the trick until you can afford one of these guys. But I do think that the ideal lens lineup for non-professionals like me is the Sony kit lens with one of the Sigma lenses. The Sigma lens could do everything that's low light and indoors, whereas the kit lens can do everything that's outdoors and also the zooming. But if you can't afford one, then definitely the kit lens will do the trick until you can afford one of these guys. And after that, if you can afford a next lens, then definitely the one would be the Sony 18-105 f4. That's recommended by everybody. And that's definitely the next lens on my list. And hopefully I can pick that up so I can review it too. But until next time.